everybody. I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Wendy Yee.
I'm Z Garcia.
And today we're going to be taking a look at San Fransisco, which is I would say a card-driven game by a acclaimed designer, Dr. Reiner Knizia.
The good doctor.
He's made a couple games in his time, yeah?
Yeah. He's definitely acclaimed.
He is acclaimed. And so let me just give you a real brief overview. Not going to go into a tremendous amount of detail. It's not a very complicated game. Show you how the game plays. Then we'll come back here and we'll talk about it for a while. How's that sound?
That sounds pretty good. Mike, kick it off.
Let's do it. Okay, here we see the setup for San Fransisco. Every player is going to have one of these player boards in front of them, and there's a central board that has some bonus cards and tokens, and then this is an area where you're going to be placing cards. On your turn, you're going to do one of two things. Most often, you're going to be doing what's called placing a project, which is simply taking the top card from this deck and placing it into one of the three columns that are represented here. So perhaps you would take this card and you would pick any one of these three and place it in that column. Then the next player would go and they have the option of doing the same thing, either placing out a project or finalizing projects. Finalizing projects means taking one of the cards or groups of cards from the columns and placing them on your board. So let's just say that players had kind of consecutively placed out some projects. When you see a card like this is a foundation card, and you're going to place one of these foundation markers on that card. One of the end game triggers is when all of these foundation tokens have been placed on cards, that would trigger the end game. The other thing that could trigger the end game would be is if any player completely filled up their city board. Those are the two end game triggers. So people continue to place projects. Or at some point, someone's going to want to take an action to take some of these cards that have been placed out in this display and place them into their city board. That's the finalize projects action. When you do that, you take all of the cards in a particular column and you place them on your board. However, there is a bit of a limitation there. Anytime you take any cards from this, you're going to take a contract. And then on a future turn, you can only take a column if the number of cards there is more than the number of contracts you have. So if you have one contract, you'd only be able to take the 2-card row. All right, so that is something you have to keep in mind. When you take the cards, you're going to place them according to the color of the card on the left side and place them on the leftmost open spot on your board. You don't have to place all the cards that you get. Generally speaking, you're going to want to do that more often than not. You see this card has a black strip on the left side. That's wild. It can go anywhere you want on your board. You can either start a row or you can place it in a already existing row. The one thing to keep in mind are these other symbols. There are a number of symbols on these cards. If you have two of these kind of compass-looking symbols there, that is going to trigger a bonus. And each of the different city districts, there are 5 city districts, has a bonus that is goes according to it. And so if I was able to trigger this blue bonus, I could get this token that would add 2 strength to any card on my tableau. Also, at any time, you can always choose the cable car, I believe, track bonus. You can always choose that instead of the bonus that you would normally take. So let's say maybe I'd done that and went ahead and did that. All right. As you are placing these cards on your city board here, you are eventually going to be filling up these rows. The first person to fill up the row, if any of all of the 5 districts, is going to get a 1-point bonus. This is a very low scoring game, so 1 point is pretty significant. You'd get that if you're the first one to fill up for each of the rows. All right. There are a number of different cards in the game that have different types of abilities. So for example, this is a depot card. You'll notice that symbol right there. When you place this, you will immediately place one of these cable cars onto it. Along the bottom of your board, you'll see that all of those have that symbol as well. And so if you were to get another card, let's say for example, I'm trying to find a green, here's a green one. If I placed that there, it would be on the leftmost side, it is adjacent to a depot, so I would go ahead and place that. If you were playing one in a different area, for example, this orange here, you would not immediately place out a cable car because it is not connected to any depot. If later on you were able to connect it to a car with a depot, you would then place that on the card. At the end of the game, you're going to get majority scoring for whoever has the most cable cars in their city. First place would get the highest, and it would go down. In a 4-player game, the last place player would actually lose a point. All right, so you're going to continue to play the game in this way, either placing cards in one of the 3 columns, taking the cards, placing them into your city, trying to get the associated bonuses, and if you are, again, the first, you're going to get a bonus here. At the end of the game, which again is triggered either by these foundation tiles running out or somebody filling up their board, then you're going to evaluate each row in order and determine who has the most kind of strength, and that's determined by these little hard hats here, all right? And so for whoever has the first, they would get the 2 points. Second place would get the 1 point, and the last place would get a -1. The last thing to talk about are these little skyscrapers, and that's where these foundation cards come in. When these get placed in your city, what the foundation tile is telling you is that if you have 7 strength surrounding it orthogonally, then you can place a skyscraper. So let's say I already have 2 here. If I had had another 5 in these 3, then I could take a skyscraper, which is worth a point, place it right on there. And if I'm the first one to do so, I get the Master Builder token, which is an additional point. That's the basics of the game, placing out contracts, or putting them into your city, kind of trying to be the first, or a bit of a race to complete these rows and columns, trying to get those bonuses in the best way possible. You can see there are a number of different bonuses. This one is just a 4th strength card. This is a wild card with a road, 1.5 points. This allows you to discard immediately 2 contracts. One little nuance is that there should always be one player in the game with 0 contracts. If at any point in the game all players own at least 1, then everyone would discard 1. That way you can kind of keep things moving. All right, well, that is San Francisco. Let's head back over and let you know what we think. All right, so I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea on how the game plays out. Why don't we talk first about the kind of the production of the game? I feel like this is hit or miss. I'm going to go with hit or miss in the aspects of production. I feel like the art is lovely and the aesthetic is nice.
I agree.
Good quality cards and player boards. But I have a couple of issues, I think. Number one is I feel like, as odd as it sounds, the game is maybe even overproduced. It really is just a very simple card game, and I feel like it has quite a bit of table space, and you've got these cardboard constructs, and you've got these really nifty cable cars, but to some extent, I don't know that they're necessary, and it's just more pieces to mess with. And I haven't had this issue, personally, but I have, in almost every game that I've taught it to, had people complain about the pastel colors maybe getting a little bit lost in the wash there. And so that is something I wanted to point out, is that I in every game I've taught it to new players, at least one person at the table has commented on the color issue. Yeah. I haven't had the issue, but so some beautiful looking stuff, but I wonder if it's more than it needs to be there.
I think that's part of it. These buildings, though, I really love. I love the 3D nature of them and the very tactileness. But they're still only worth a point, and everything in this game is worth a point. And so I just remember my first game, I thought, oh, I got to build those buildings. And then I was like, oh, they're not worth like 3 points. They're still only worth a point.
They could be worth 2 if you're the first or you have the most. But yeah,
that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, there's that sense of like overemphasis on them almost because of the production.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have as big of a problem with the production here as you seem to have, Mike. I do think the usability of these, what are they called?
Cable
cars, yeah. The fact that it took me longer than it should have when I first played it to understand that it didn't matter where you put them around the card, that it was just sort of like highlighting the entire card as like checked on.
Right.
Connected, yeah.
Yeah, and because you can put them underneath or next to the card, and that, I think, visually, it makes sense geographically that the cable cars run between the buildings, but it made it harder to internalize by having this physical piece there.
Interesting.
That instead of just it being like boop in the middle of the card and just reminding the player this is connected. Yeah. That it was around the outside. I wish that would have been less thematic. Yeah. Kind of. I mean, it's the kind of thing that they tried to, again, produce it to look cool, and so you can look at it and go, ooh, yeah, San Francisco, sure.
To me, I think that the purpose, at least the purpose I find in those, is not on my board. it's looking at the other boards. Because, you know, having a card with a street on it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have a cable car on it, right? It has to either have one of those depots or be connected to a depot. And so the use of those, I think, are more on looking across the table and saying, okay, man, Z's got like 7 cable cars over there. I'm not even going to try to fight for that.
Right.
Interesting, because I felt like I wish that there was a specific spot on the streets to place them. So instead of anywhere on the street, because then at least it would be unified.
Right,
Like I
that's
didn't need it in the middle of the card, but I wish that it was either on the side or on the bottom.
I guess I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, it just sort of looks messier than it should for a game that is clearly so geometric.
Right.
For this to be the one thing that is very thematic, they're like, oh, you know, just put it on the street. Anywhere on the street, it's fine. You know, streetcar, street. No, it goes on, and that spot, yeah, it could be the corner, it could be the center, it could be anywhere. But so that I can quickly look and go, that's on. That card is turned on with the streetcar. Not, oh, this one is right here, so is it the one above or below? Let me look closer. You know, that it's a minor thing, but it is the only complaint I really had with the production. I didn't really have too much of a problem with anything else. I thought the gray cards, there's some of the colors, they're a little tricky. You're not quite sure, is that a wild card or this color or what is that? But it was a minor complaint I had. So
got it. All right. Well, let's talk about the actual core gameplay, the mechanics of the game, how all that works out. And you know, we've mentioned the designer before, Reiner Knizia, and one thing that he's been accused of many things, but unbalanced games is not one of them. And this feels like an extremely tight game. You've already alluded to the fact that, you know, points are at a premium. That, I'll be honest with you, is probably my biggest positive of this game. But I feel like it is essential that when you teach the game to new players, you tell them a high score is probably going to be around 10 points.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's very important that you emphasize that at the beginning, that points are at a premium. A negative point, one single negative point is a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to kind of let people have those expectations going in. It's a game that is driven by very simple actions, like a lot of his games are. You play a single card into one of 3 columns, or you grab all the cards out of a column. My biggest beef with this game in general is twofold. One is that I feel like oftentimes on your turn, you are stuck being in a situation where you have to draw a card and you make other people have better options. And there are many, many turns in the game where it feels unsatisfying because you are locked, because you have too many contracts.
The decisions just don't feel good.
They don't, it's like, okay, I have to draw a card. I'm gonna, which great column do I want to set Z up for? Which great column do I want to set Wendy up for? And that can feel a little bit like crushing. It's like, man. Yeah. And it seems like the ratio of times that happens is higher than I would like it to be.
Interesting. The part that I was excited about is these what are they?
The foundations?
No, not foundations.
Oh, the contracts.
The contracts. I thought it was going to be a very interesting mechanism of this choice of, am I going to wait and I'm going to let these columns fill up a lot. Nobody can grab them until I grab some later. Am I going to let it fill up? But what I realized is in the games that people did that, then all the other columns got filled up as well, because if I'm the one who's waiting and holding out, I'm only ever placing 1 card per round. And so they still get spread out. So I've waited all this time to have a really super awesome big move. And then Mike has a big move, and then Z has a big move.
It evens out.
And it evens out so quickly that I don't feel like it's ever worth waiting. It will be rare in this game that if I have an opportunity to pick a column, that I won't pick a column, that instead I will wait.
Yeah, I agree.
And I was excited that I thought there was going to be those choices, and they just weren't there.
And I found that mechanism to be much ado about nothing.
It's clunky to me. It's super unintuitive.
It's just like, okay, it took most of the teach was understanding this idea of no, and stopping people from playing oftentimes where they go to take something out, like, no,
you can't.
I'll explain this for the 5th time. You can take that one because you have this many, and you need to wait for these 2 people to have 1 more, and then you can all put back. And it didn't seem to really lead, like you were saying, to any particularly fascinating moments.
Right.
It was much ado about nothing. I get it mechanically what it's doing. There probably was a more elegant solution to that.
That's the part that's surprising, because again, not to harp on the designer too much, but he oftentimes gets accused of making themeless games, and I think that that's usually a overstated thing. But in this case, there's no thematic connection between this idea of contracts and getting.
Sure.
I mean, I think they try, but it's a clunky mechanism to me. It's one that is super hard, and it's very odd. It's like because you can never have a situation where someone doesn't have you can never have. See, it's even hard for me to explain it too. At least one person has to have no contracts.
Right.
And so there's often times where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to take a contract and then I'm going to put it right back because it's not elegant.
And then people forget.
And it's purely mechanical.
They count wrong. You're like, oh, I didn't realize that you had gotten one and I was supposed to put one back, or I forgot to take one, or it just adds more for less.
It just seems, again, looking at the game is trying to almost justify its production and size with some of these mechanisms.
Yeah.
I guess at the end of the day, I'm going to wait for San Francisco, the card game, which is going to be the distillation of this into a cleaner, more portable, ultimately better game.
Yeah.
And knowing anything about Knizia, I suspect that's coming. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Because this could stand to be shaved down a little bit.
I agree.
And you probably get a better game.
So what score are you going to give it?
Are we going right there? All right, I guess we'll go to the scores.
For me, this one is I enjoy my plays of it, and I like the look. I like what's going on in it. It is kind of clunky. I'm coming in at a 6. I liked it all right, and I would be willing to play it with anybody who wanted to give it a go. It's not very long. It's satisfying enough. I enjoy the little races going on in the game. But I doubt it's one I'm going to be remembering in 6 months, a year, maybe. I'm going to forget about this one. I'll wait for that card game. 6.
Okay, I think I have very, very similar thoughts. I'm going to give it a 6 as well. This is one of those that I think that the quickness of it and the very simple nature of the either grab or place a card, I think that's very clean. It's easy to teach. The contracts get a little funky. Teaching that, but if you're running the game with them, it's just very clear. You get one, you get one, you get one. You don't. So I think that's good, but I don't think I'm ever going to pull it off the shelf myself. I don't think I'm ever going to say, hey, let's play San Francisco. And I agree that I think in a little bit of time, I will forget that it existed.
Well, this is, I feel like a little bit of an evil review here because I'm also coming in at a 6. Because this is one that it's on the edge. I mean, I don't feel comfortable recommending it because there's too many caveats. I don't love the way the contract system works. But I do like how tight the scoring is. I feel like, even the silliness of having half points in this game actually means something.
Yeah.
I like that. I like the bonuses in the game. I think the bonuses are clever and satisfying, and I think the time to play is good. But there's just too many things that drag it down. I'm with you. I want a redone version of this that is more elegant, more stripped down, more streamlined.
Yeah, keep the look. I like the look.
The look is nice.
The line work is very pretty.
Right.
But yeah, it needs a little streamlining.
Needs a little bit of something. It's just not quite there. As odd as it sounds, I feel like this is one that maybe needed to be developed more. I think there's some solid mechanical ideas, but it just feels a little bit off. So 6 is all around, right on the edge, but we couldn't quite give it that recommendation. All right, well, until next time, I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Wendy Yee.
I'm Z Garcia.
Have fun leaving your hearts. Maybe not in the box. It'd be kind of messy.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, let's not do that. Let's not do that.